Last question. Question for intersectionality of identity. Um, so starting off by looking at the power continuum charts, and it was tough to go through that. I mean, and I keep going back to this article on privilege, oppression, and difference by Johnson. But the piece on privilege, just really is tough to read and then go through and talk about where the power lies and how I fall on that. I mean, and especially here in the article where it talks about awareness requires effort and commitment. Being able to command the attention of lower status individuals without having to give it in return is a key aspect of privilege. African Americans, for example, have to pay close attention to whites and the white culture and get to know them well enough to avoid displeasing them. And since whites control jobs, schools, government, the police, and most other resources and sources of power, white privilege gives white little reason to pay attention to African Americans or how the white privilege affects them. I mean, that's sad. It's horrible. I think going through and putting myself on this power chart and blowing it off the charts, feeling bad for where I'm marking things and trying to go back further on certain sections when it's just reality has it where it's like I'm really high on this power chart. I mean, the only one that I went less on power was poor working class. I mean, even that is so relative where I'm more just basing that off of the kind of income we had last year with myself working in sales and making really good money as well as my wife working compared to now where I don't make anything student teaching. So but my wife is still working full time and making good money. So, I mean, I easily don't need to be putting myself low on that either. But regardless, the power continuum, in my opinion, anyway, it was tough to see, and I don't really have any of them that I'm honestly low on or have least privilege. Which to me really drives home the point of not abusing that. It's there. It's a part of our society. It's a part of my world. It's something I live in. Um, what I have now to do is one is to not abuse that. Two, be aware of it and share that with my son, who's going to find himself probably in a very similar situation. And then I think beyond that, it's really having the conversation in the classroom and having it from both sides. Letting the white boys in the class understand that the privilege is there and that it's not something to be oblivious of. It's not something to pretend like doesn't exist. It's not something to get defensive about, which Johnson talks about. It's more something to understand it's there, understand, let them wrestle with, is that fair or not fair? For me, obviously I'm at a point where it's not fair at all, and it's frustrating, and it's not something that I'm proud of, nor do I want to relish in. However, it's reality. So from the power continuum chart standpoint, there's not really one that I have low privilege on. So to talk about that, it was more just kind of a frustration. But again, I think the point is that in tied to privilege, it's more of a being aware of it, accepting it, not abusing it, and then passing this understanding and this awareness and identifying with it to not only my son and also in the classroom, and making sure that I do my part of ending this and letting people be aware of it. Next, looking back at the big 8 identities and list the 3 traits you think you're judged by the most. So when I was looking at this, again, right now in where I'm at in my life and my career, I think it would be gender, age, and maybe the socioeconomic class piece. Gender and age for sure. Gender, I think I'm judged by just because, being in elementary education. It's not the norm. I think earlier I made a mistake by saying I work with 6th grade teachers that are male. It's female, actually. Like, so much of elementary education is female. So I would assume that potentially there's judgment there because of those statistics. Why would I want to be elementary education? Especially coming from my previous employment in sales. Why would you take that employment or that economic hit, paycheck hit? So I'm sure judgment could be found there. Again, when something's different, when you're different, I feel like that lends towards judgment. I think that's what everything here is talking about. I feel this on a minute perspective, but I mean, I think it's potentially there as being a male. Why are you doing elementary education? Age, I think that's also kind of it. Making a life change at age 39. Having a successful career for 13 years. Why are you changing? I have my own personal reasons and beliefs as to why I'm doing it. And a lot of that is tied to wanting to impact the society. I could care less about selling widgets and various things like that. I would rather learn, study, get educated, and share thoughts on these topics, and help the next generation prepare. So, but that's my own soapbox. To that point, my age, I'm sure there's judgment there as well. Why would you make this change? Why would you start all over, going back to school, all those things? But for me, I'm more proud of it than anything. But in looking at that, what am I getting judged on? There's probably some of that there. Again, just being different. I mean, differences is where people are going to judge. And then social economic, I think that kind of ties into this as well. Why would you get paid less for something? Why would you start all over? Why would you deal with that kind of an idea? So I think those are all tied into it. I haven't necessarily felt any of this. Like, I haven't heard any of this. I haven't been questioned on it, but I'm just trying to think through for this activity what might come up. And those are the differences that I find. And through differences, which I think is what we're talking about, differences is where judgment happens. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. If I could change one of those for this activity and how people perceive me, it would be interesting to change, and maybe not so much right now, where if I were to change my gender, how would people perceive me? Because I almost think, in elementary education, I might get perceived, positively for being female. I don't know. It's kind of a weird way to look at it, but I think about like going back into sales and changing my gender into female. Yeah, I mean, just looking back on my career, management, male dominated. Just the office in general, the majority of it is males. So, and I can only imagine that being a female in that realm, I would get perceived in a much different light. I don't know if I would be a part of as many conversations just around the water cooler. I don't know if I would get the opportunities I received from the standpoint of growth in my career. Just thinking, comparing that to my wife, who, got told one time from her CEO, that she didn't want to bring her into board meetings because she was an attractive blonde that didn't know if they would take her serious in the board meetings. So putting myself in that, no one ever said anything like that to me. We're not going to bring you in here because of your gender and the way you look. I mean, maybe because I'm my intelligence don't want to bring me in, but from a standpoint of gender and look, not a chance. Nothing have I ever heard, definitely never been told to me like that was told to her. So, changing that, if I were to change that gender, not only what my wife went through, but then reading all, the text that we have, and the privilege that's just tied to white males, and just changing one of those to a white female, would be an uphill battle to fight. So that would be the one I maybe change, and how that might impact me more so from previous career. Again, elementary education, kind of tough to think how that might necessarily be negative. But maybe there's some things there that I'm just not kind of thinking through at this point. What do you consider to be the most salient intersection of your big eights? Describe the dynamic of that intersection in regards to the operation of power in your society. So the biggest salient for me that I'm seeing, and that kind of been my theme through this project, and this overall project, has been being a white male. Being a white male, there's so much privilege that can easily be abused, and I think a lot of that abuse is now where we're at from a society perspective in race, how race is impacted and is unequal. I think it's impacting gender and what's being seen in Hollywood, and all the cases coming out of sexual abuse, male to females. So those two, I think, are the most salient intersections in my world, and the privilege that's tied to that. And again, I can't stress how much that my what my goals are is to not abuse that, and to have this conversation and talk about it, not only with my son but with my classroom, that it's real, that white males are a part of a group that doesn't allow everybody in, and that's not okay, and that's not right. And I want to change that. And it's been good to do this activity, really kind of diving deeper into all those different aspects, and how the text that we've read ties into these questions that we've been thinking about, and how we identify who we are, or how I identify who I am, how I identified kind of where I'm at for my race identity, the different type of identity with civil or civic, and then also just looking at, diving further into my identity traits and the power continuum, and really kind of feeling empty at the end of this. But it's a good empty where it's struggle that is allowing for growth. So with that said, this has been a good opportunity, and I think interweaving all of this into how can I bring it into the classroom has been something that I've been trying to do throughout. Really, it's conversations. Really, it's getting the students to think about where they're at, and where they're at. How does that impact themselves and the world around them, and how do they want to impact themselves and the world around them with that new knowledge? So it's all about growth and change. It's all about understanding who we are. It's all about understanding who other people are, and that intersection between them, and what we want to do to change the society. So it's been a good project, and it's been a good topic to think about, and obviously a lot more to think about, and a lot more growth from my end. But it's a good starting point, and appreciate the time. Let me do it.